I volunteered to work in the Antarctic for 3 seasons from 1964 to 1978. I found my times there to be the most interesting, stimulating periods of my 41-year career working for the USGS. 10 years after my 3rd season, when I was nearly 60 years old, I was approached about volunteering again, but I declined. And our extreme cold climate is for a young man. The following film attempts to cover some of my experiences from my 3 summer seasons. On a humorous note about the medical examination prior to my tours, an examining psychiatrist informed me that I was not there to determine my sanity. The fact that I had volunteered for duty in the Antarctic already established where I stood in that regard. The United States Geological Survey, USGS, began in 1956, the geophysical year, to loan cartographers and surveyors to the United States Antarctic Research Program, USARP. The loan was for mapping purposes as well as other types of major surveys. Let me include a bit of history about exploration in the Antarctic. On November 1st, 1911, Sir Charles Wright was a member of the Southern Party team led by Robert Falcon Scott that set off from their Antarctic base camp at Camp Evans with the intentions of reaching the South Pole. On December 22nd, 7 weeks into the journey, while still 300 miles from the pole, he was in the first supporting party which Scott sent back. Wright spent the next 5 weeks helping the party navigate the 580 miles back to Cape Evans, where they waited for Scott and his party's return from the pole. Scott never arrived. A year later, November 12th, 1912, Wright, a member of the 11-man search party that spotted the tent containing the bodies of Scott and the other 2 explorers who had all perished on their return trek from the South Pole 8 months earlier. They had succumbed when several miles from base camp and safety. As you may know, Scott was beaten in the race to reach the South Pole by Roald Amundsen, the Norwegian explorer, who preceded him by just 1 month. Sir Charles Wright was visiting Antarctica in 1965 when he was 77. I had the good fortune to talk to him several times. As he was leaving and struggling to carry his 2 heavy bags to the plane, as we all did, the pilot rushed to help him. Wright's comment to him was, "I hate this place." The pilot relayed that comment by Wright to the bartender later at McMurdo, who placed a banner over the bar and became the Antarctic motto. Maybe it still is. Much of my old film dealt with my time training in Western Virginia and in New Zealand during the couple of weeks prior to and following each season's work in the Antarctic. Only my time in the Antarctic is included in this film. About 30% of my work involved mapping, and about 70% dealt with other types of surveys, which I'll describe as they are shown. The McMurdo Station was established on Ross Island in 1956 off the Antarctic continent on a cinder cone from nearby Mount Erebus. It is a major U.S. base in the Antarctica. There is no area large enough on Ross Island for an airfield. McMurdo Sound is utilized from October to February when ice is of sufficient strength and depth to allow C-130 transport planes to land on an area called Williams Field. Pilots of the C-130s routinely examine the sound for signs of ice cracking, usually beginning about mid-February. Once cracks were spotted, a very speedy removal of all equipment from the ice on the sound was the order of the day. Summer personnel had to leave immediately as all flights into McMurdo would end. Later, as all ice was breaking icebreakers and supply ships would come into McMurdo with more supplies. Williams Field was 7 miles from the base at McMurdo, so people were transported on personnel carriers like the one shown here. These dogs were New Zealand teams that came over the hill from New Zealand Scott Base. They were mainly for show, but used some by the New Zealanders. The Americans had long since become totally mechanized. This sled, called a Mawson, and named for Sir Robert Mawson, another earlier explorer of the Antarctic, was used extensively in the early years. It is now mostly a relic. You are seeing a panorama of the McMurdo Base area that I took from nearby Observation Hill, starting with Mount Erebus at elevation of 12,447 feet in the distance. Here is panning over downtown McMurdo to Hut Point, site of Scott's cabin. It is now a national museum with the interior photo of his original supplies left in place. The road leads from McMurdo Station over the saddle between Observation Hill and the rest of the ridge to Mount Erebus, down to New Zealand Scott Base, a distance of several miles from McMurdo. Here I am relaxing in the Nodwell personnel carrier and standing outside of the Nodwell. The lieutenant in charge of Byrd Station escorted my team members, Merle Southern, Bill Marshall, Bruce Schwartz, and me down into Old Byrd Station in 1967. This cross was erected at the top of Observation Hill with an inscription on the backside from Alfred Tennyson's poem, Ulysses. It is a memorial to the perished members of Scott's party, which reads, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield, and faces the ice shelf where they died. The photo is of Tom Taylor and me against the cross. I took these aerial photos of typical Antarctic terrain, ice crevasses, a hazard in the mountainous areas. We usually knew the location of crevasses, even covered ones, from the aerial photographs, as snow over a crevasse is a different shade on the photos. The inset panel is of C-130 controls. Here is the McMurdo Station, called Antarctica's Banana Belt, on a moderately bad day from my dorm window. On a really bad day, there is no visibility beyond one's hand. In 1964, the warmest day ever recorded was plus 41 degrees Fahrenheit. I recently heard in 2021 that a temperature of plus 70 degrees has been recorded. Terrible news for the world. I enjoyed some downtime in the library with the Post mascot. I'm relaxing with the project's liaison person between us at McMurdo and USGS headquarters in the States. Bill McDonald was instrumental in obtaining anything we needed but didn't have on hand. He was quicker in obtaining items from the States than our having to wait for anything to be sent from Australia or New Zealand. Here is my barracks where I write letters home. This particular barracks at McMurdo was called a Jamesway. I'm in an R4D with a cook and medic, part of our support crew, on our way to begin mapping on the David Glacier. Helicopters were widely used in mountainous areas to cover intermediate distances, especially for mapping and geological purposes. This shows gas being delivered by the R4D and our helicopter being gassed and a helicopter rotor repair. Carrying heavy loads, the R4D aircraft needed assistance in the form of JATO, bottles or jet assistance takeoff. This R4D had just made a delivery to us. It still had several unfired JATO bottles attached, which impeded its speed of travel after takeoff. The pilot had hit the JATO firing button in air as he hit the release button at the same time after taking off. The JATO bottles fired up through one of the two engines, knocking off the propeller blades. One blade flew into the cabin at the navigator's seat location. Luckily, the navigator had just moved forward to talk to the pilot. No one was hurt, and the plane landed safely. I was told that more than 20 R4D twin-engine planes had accidentally been destroyed in the Antarctic. The R4D was mostly replaced by the much more powerful C-130, a successful JATO takeoff bottles. I have an amusing personal story with this helicopter pilot, also named Reid, R-E-I-D. While flying one day and checking for a possible landing site in the mountainous area, he asked if I had talked to my wife lately and offered to call her in the States. At an elevation of about 11,000 feet, he had an excellent antenna. He made connections with the radio operator in the States who called my wife. Due to the helicopter's noise, I couldn't hear her. So the pilot ended up talking to my wife. Did hear one of her comments, though. Your little joke backfired. I am going to have twins. She delivered 2 healthy babies a month later at Stanford. I first saw them at 2 months. This field of Adelie penguins at Hallett's Station stretched as far as the eye can see. They are inquisitive and friendly, making it easy to pick up either adults or chicks. While flying about 20 miles down the coast from Hallett's Station, we spotted a field of emperor penguins. The pilot sat the helicopter down to take a few pictures. Note the school gull, a serious predator to penguin chicks and eggs. As these big guys weren't so friendly and some were close to 6 feet tall, we were very careful around them. Helicopters were used to fly us in to photograph identifiable mountain tops, leapfrogging usually to 20 to 30 miles intervals top to top. At each